On a warm morning in July 1804, a boat is rowed across the Hudson River to Lower Manhattan. In the boat lies Alexander Hamilton. He was a hero of the American Revolution, architect of the country's financial system, and under President Washington, the most powerful man in the United States. Wounded and bleeding, he is near death. Gouverneur Morris is called upon to give the funeral oration. He is one of Hamilton's closest friends.
He was vain, indiscreet, and opinionated. These things must be told to give a full measure of his character. But I must do it in such a manner as not to give offense to the mourners. This is not going to be easy.
Morris, the man who had penned the words, "We the people," is having severe writer's block. No founder had done more to shape the character of the country than Alexander Hamilton. Yet no founder was more controversial.
The first point of his biography is that he was of illegitimate birth. Well, I'll have to pass over that one in some clever way. I'll mention, of course, his share in forming the Constitution, but then again, there's his domestic life. I have to say something about his wife, but then there's a small matter of infidelity that he foolishly published to the world. His administration of the country's finances. Yes, but many are still very hostile to it. I must somehow reconcile all this. Dueling. In principle, he was against dueling, but he was killed in a duel. Not only is the subject impossible to write, but I shall still have to memorize it. The corpse is already putrid, and the funeral must take place tomorrow.
The story, The Life of Alexander Hamilton, is a story that the most gifted novelist could not have invented. Too much of it would seem implausible in terms of what happened to this man in the space of 49 years. I mean, it's just better than any novel.
Hamilton's the only one of the founding fathers who was an outsider, an orphan, an immigrant, a scholarship boy, a college dropout.
It's hard to explain Hamilton because what you're trying to explain is genius. How do you explain genius?
He's so capable, so kind of self-consciously brilliant in a way, that he makes an amazing number of enemies.
Hamilton, in many ways, is a tragic figure because the love of honor, which is the source of his greatness, I would argue, is completely consistent with Greek tragedy, also the source of his downfall.
That bastard brat of a Scottish peddler. His ambition, his restlessness, and all his grandiose schemes come, I'm convinced, from a superabundance of secretions, which he couldn't find enough whores to absorb.
Alexander Hamilton was unique among the founding fathers. He was an outsider. Born in 1755, not in the American colonies, but on Nevis, a tiny tropical island in the Caribbean. He came into this world at the very bottom of the social order. He was a bastard. Illegitimate because his mother, as a divorced woman, was not legally married to his father. As a bastard, Hamilton was prohibited from attending a Christian school and had no rights of inheritance.
It's hard for us to transport ourselves back to a time in the 18th century when everything revolved around birth and breeding and pedigree. I think that the illegitimacy had the most profound effect psychologically on Hamilton. It was considered the most dishonored state, and I think that it produced in Hamilton a lifelong obsession with honor.
When Alexander is 10, his family moves some 100 miles to St. Croix, where hundreds of plantations, worked by slaves, produce sugar and coffee for export. Hamilton's father was descended from Scottish nobility. He had come to the West Indies to make his fortune in the sugar trade, but he was never successful. Soon after they arrive on St. Croix, James Hamilton abandons the family. Alexander will never see his father again.
Everything went wrong for Alexander Hamilton in a very short time, around the age of 13. His mother died of yellow fever. His father had already left 2 years before. He then had no protector. He had an uncle who tried to save Alexander's estate, small as it was, but his mother's first husband got everything.
He was then farmed out to a first cousin who committed suicide a year later. So it's like calamities of biblical proportions descend on this young man. I think that these experiences would have shattered a lesser individual, but all of these misfortunes actually toughen this spirit of self-reliance. He realized that his great asset was his intelligence, which he would have to do everything to develop.
The one thing Hamilton grasped out of his mother's very modest estate was the books. Nobody wanted them. His uncle said, "You get the books." And he pored over them, and he pored over them.
He reads and reads and reads, and above all, he reads the stories of the great statesmen of ancient Greece and Rome as they're revealed in the works of Livy and Plutarch and others. And this is very important for understanding his love of fame, his love of honor.
Alexander's youthful imagination is captured by tales of conquering heroes and of statesmen who built the glorious Roman Empire.
Hamilton was in love with fame, there's no doubt about that. But his understanding of fame is totally different from our understanding of fame. To be famous now is to be well known by everybody in the world. You're a celebrity. But that wasn't true in the 18th century. Fame was an achievement that a man created in the course of his life. He had to do something remarkable. He had to found a country or an empire.
On a tiny, remote island, illegitimate and without family, Alexander Hamilton seems in an unlikely position to achieve fame. At the age of 14, he's employed as a clerk for the firm of Beekman and Kruger, an important American trading company on St. Croix.
Hamilton, as a teenager, had to become a master of international currencies. There was no one currency. He had to know the exchange rates, Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, French, English, etc. He had to be an evaluator, an appraiser, a money changer. And so he learned a great deal about trade in a very short time.
His employer gets sick, and young Hamilton is left in charge of the company.
And so he saved the business by taking over for 6 months. This little skinny kid was bossing around surly, brutal ship captains 3 times his age.
To Nicholas Kruger, January 10th, 1772. Sir, the 101 barrels of superfine flour from Philadelphia have landed. I have already sold 40 at 11.5 pieces of 8 a barrel, but as there are fewer delivered, I will insist on 12 for the rest. As I am very hurried just now, I beg you will accept this brief account. I remain with the closest attention to your interests, dear sir. Alexander Hamilton.
The buying and selling of slaves to work the sugarcane fields is a major part of business in the West Indies. Hamilton daily witnesses scenes of incredible brutality. He comes to see slavery not just as appalling degradation, but as a senseless waste of human talent. He feels that his own talents, too, are being squandered in this rigidly hierarchical world. He writes to his friend Edward Stevens.
To confess my weakness, Ned, my ambition is so prevalent that I disdain the groveling conditions of a clerk to which my fortune condemns me. I would willingly risk my life, though not my character, to exalt my station. My folly makes me ashamed. Yet, Neddy, we know that such schemes can triumph when the schemer is resolute. Oh, how I wish there was a war.
What a remarkable statement. You know, he's 14 years old, and he does ultimately willingly sacrifice his life, but not his character, again and again and again.
By 1772, the teenager is not only running a major shipping company, but also writing articles for the island's newspaper and publishing poetry and sermons. Influential people on the island are struck by his brilliance and ability. They establish a fund for the young prodigy. Hamilton will go to the American colonies to be educated.
I think that he felt that fate had handed him an opportunity to reinvent himself and to start life over. But I don't think that he ever fully left the world of his childhood behind him. He was poor, he was illegitimate, he was ashamed of all of those things. And even though he tried so hard to escape, on some level, he was always trapped back in the darkness of that boyhood.